All right, we're going to do a quick overview of the organs in the cat now. We'll start up at the top, and first of all, here in his neck, you can see his larynx, or voice box. When we do the respiratory lab, we're going to come back and dissect that out. But there's the larynx. Attached to the larynx, you see a tube. It has a slice in it, but that tube is the trachea. That's the windpipe. Now, if you lift with your probe, if you stick the probe behind the trachea, there, and look behind, there's a second tube behind the trachea. That's the esophagus, or food tube. People talk about having something going down the wrong tube. These are the two tubes in your neck. So we have the trachea for air in the front and the esophagus for food in the back. Now, in the thoracic or chest cavity, we have two major organs. These, on either side, are the lungs, and right here in the middle is the heart. Now, the heart is in a sac called a pericardium. One thing that you are going to need to do today is remove the pericardium. So I usually use a blunt probe and stick the probe in the pericardium, and then with my scissors, I try to cut the pericardial sac off. It's really thin, and I don't know if you can see how thin it is. It's about as thick as a piece of saran wrap, but it's a clear covering on the heart. Let me see if I can hold it open and you can see how thin this is right here. Yep. Can you see that? Okay. Now, I'm going to cut a little more pericardium off. And now you can see the heart very clearly. You can even see the auricles at the top of the heart here and here. All right, so we have the lungs and the heart in the thoracic cavity. Then the diaphragm, the muscle that separates the thoracic cavity from the abdominal cavity. Underneath the diaphragm, we see the first big organ is the liver. Embedded in between the lobes of the liver is a little green sac. Right there. That's the gallbladder. Bile is made in the liver, stored in the gallbladder. So that's the gallbladder. Now let me go back to the esophagus. We saw the esophagus up here. We said it was the tube behind the trachea. But it actually continues all the way down behind the lungs. Now maybe a hand to hold that back, I'm not sure. There's a lot of fluid in here, but let me see if I can show you where the esophagus is. There it is. All right. So the esophagus began up here, but it continues here, and it goes to the diaphragm right here. I'm going to swing this a little sideways. And at the diaphragm, the esophagus enters through a hole called the esophageal hiatus. When you have hiatal hernia, it's right there. On the other side of the diaphragm, the esophagus comes down and dumps into this organ. And this cat, it's very big. This is the stomach. So you can see the esophagus coming down right here through a hole in the diaphragm and dumping into the stomach. This cat had a big meal before. Large stomach. Okay. Now, on the far side, on the distal side of the stomach, is the beginning of this long, skinny, worm-like organ. That's the small intestine. You'd wonder why it's called small, because it's really long. It's called small because it has a narrow diameter. If you keep following the small intestine, eventually it hooks up with something that is much larger. And so that would be the large intestine. So the small intestine, narrow diameter, runs into the large intestine. In humans, we're going to talk about the ascending colon, the transverse colon, the descending. In the cat, we're just going to call it large intestine because they don't have those different sections. And then at the bottom of the large intestine, down here where you can't really see too well, that's going to be the rectum. And then the opening down here is the anus. Now, some other organs that are down here in the abdominal cavity. On the left-hand side is a brown organ. It almost looks like the same color as the liver. That's the spleen. The human has the spleen located in the same place. It's not quite as large in a human. It's on the left side, left upper quadrant. All right, so that's the spleen. Now, there's a fatty apron that actually hangs down over the intestines. When you have a beer belly, that's where you gain weight. But it's called the greater omentum. And I'm going to lift the greater omentum up like a flap, and I'm going to look underneath. And do you see something that looks like, to me it looks like a piece of gum that you scraped off the bottom of your shoe right there. I mean, it hardly looks like an organ, but you can't live without it. That's your pancreas. So the pancreas is underneath the stomach, and you see it by lifting up the greater omentum. It's this brown L-shaped organ right here. That's where insulin is made. Some other organs that you want to know, if you lift all of this up and pull it to the side, I'm going to use my blunt probe to kind of clear things out a bit. You'll see a blue, and it's not necessarily blue, but you'll see an organ that's shaped kind of like a kidney bean. That's because it's the kidney. That's where urine is formed. In humans, there's a gland that sits right on top of the kidney called the adrenal gland. In cats, the adrenal gland is not right on top of the kidney, but it is slightly medial to the kidney. Now I'm going to try to hold it up here. I'm not sure how well this is going to show up. It's very small. Let me clear out some of the fat. It looks like a little brown pea, and it has a blue vein on top of it. Okay, that's the adrenal gland. The vein is the adrenolumbar vein, but that's the adrenal gland. So that's the kidney. Now the kidney makes the urine, and then it travels from the kidney down a tube, and this is the tube that it travels down right here. That tube is called the ureter. The ureter carries the urine from the kidney down to the urinary bladder. Okay, and here's the urinary bladder. It's empty. Usually empties when the cat dies, but there's the urinary bladder, and down below the urinary bladder, I would need to make a cut through the bone to really see it, but you can see the beginning of yet another tube. That's the urethra. So the urethra is going to carry the urine from the bladder to the outside. I'll show you one more organ. This happens to be a female cat, and so you can see her reproductive organs. This is her uterus. In the cat, the uterus has 2 uterine horns, and that's why she can have so many kittens. In the human, it's just 1 uterine body, but she can have 3 kittens on this side and 3 on this side. And then at the top of the uterine horns, you see a little oval organ right there, and that is her ovary. And so that's a quick overview of the cat's organs.